Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. Welcome back, everybody, to the Near Memo. This is episode 87, believe it or not. And we welcome back the illustrious and comparable Mike Blumenthal from his fabulous month-long European vacation / conference appearance at the Cinda event in Florence that just concluded. So we've had some great episodes in Mike's absence with guests, and we're going to continue that in addition to doing our regular commentary on the week's news with the three of us. I'm
Mike, if you take one more vacation, you might find yourself out of a panelist role. So
we're gonna trade you for a couple of draft picks, I think.
There's nothing wrong with having created a world in which they're created a product in which it works without me and works better without me.
That's right.
That's
right.
Actually a high honor. So I'm not at all distraught by that possibility.
Okay, well, my dog is here threatening to bark. So, David, why don't you lead off with your item about Shopify this week? So there was an interesting study by the Globe and Mail, and tell us what it said.
Yeah, so I thought it was a really interesting concept around which to build a study. They looked at the number or the percentage of stores, online stores, on various platforms: Shopify, Wix, WooCommerce, PrestaShop, a couple of others, that the sort of burn rate or the churn rate of stores that had been launched on those platforms sort of over the last 3 years. They did a little bit of 2019 analysis, and then obviously 2020 and 2021 are the prime pandemic years when a bunch of people were launching stores. And so they were looking at how many of those stores are sort of still in existence after a year. And Shopify was actually the lowest number at 34% of all of those competitors. And the other one I didn't mention, I think, was Squarespace. It was actually the lowest. And I think that they sort of dove into some theories in terms of, why this might be the case. I think the biggest possible theory that jumped out here that they highlighted, which I think is potentially accurate, is that Shopify stores are basically so easy to get up and running that that's simple for a lot of people to try it. You don't really need to hire a full-time developer to help you set it up. You can get in and out for $30 if you don't really like the experience. You can bounce and try something else. But some of the other platforms, in particular, in my own personal experience, WooCommerce and PrestaShop and some of the others, are very, very difficult to get started. And you probably do need to hire someone to actually build that for you. And so if you've put in this, multi-thousand, if not multi-tens of $1,000 investment in terms of getting set up on a given platform, you're probably more committed to sticking with it and seeing if it can actually grow with you. So I think that's one of the theories that may explain why WooCommerce is sort of the stickiest, quote unquote, stickiest of the e-commerce platforms. We did see that both Wix and Squarespace were sort of directionally closer to Shopify's churn rates. And both of those platforms are obviously kind of almost as easy, if not easier, to set up than Shopify. So that's kind of one interesting data point there. The other one is my personal. This is not backed necessarily by data, but a possible theory for the sort of relative success of Shopify still, even though it has this quote unquote incredible churn rate, is that the merchants that stick around on Shopify, their 34% merchants who do stick around, are likely to be very, very serious merchants that have chosen Shopify as a growth platform. There's some data here around Shopify Plus that says that it's, performing 70% better or something in terms of churn rate than typical normal Shopify customers. We've seen Shopify go or try to go a little bit more enterprise with the Klaviyo partnership that they announced a couple of months ago. So I think that they're probably starting to focus more on the 34% of customers who are sticking around, who are doing, millions or tens of millions of dollars on the platform, as opposed to, somebody who's on Wix or Squarespace is probably, if you're doing $10 million on a Wix e-commerce store, God help you. And the flip side of that is that the smaller merchants who have invested a bunch of money in WooCommerce, for example, are not as likely to sort of switch away. So that's kind of my sort of explanation as to why this is. Again, I thought it was a super interesting story, very interesting study in terms of actually something to look at. I don't know that it's sort of the story had a little bit of sort of doom and gloom around Shopify, which I don't necessarily take away as a definitive takeaway.
Well, I mean, that's the superficial take on the story, is that they don't disclose this data. We're exposing it for the first time. Oh my God, look, 70% of their customers are churning out after a year. I mean, I think the analysis that you just gave is right. There's a lot of layers here, and Shopify, I think, will be under some pressure now, based on the existence of this, to kind of tell a story around retention that they haven't been in the past. They've only talked about top line growth. So we'll see.
And I think the more interesting story would be, some sort of bell curve of revenues of stores that have been around for a year.
Right. Revenue per store. Right. Mike.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, that was one question I was going to ask. Is there any, like total volume is probably a better indicator than almost any other indicator here. I was curious about market share.
I think they disclose gross merchandise value, but I'm not sure off the top of my head. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and the other question was just crude market share. How did that pan out between these different platforms or these different products?
Well, that would be relatively easy to pull with Built With data, just in terms of the volume of stores on each of these. So,
for a later episode, perhaps.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.